Guess who spoke today? Xi Jinping. Finally, he faced the world. After being silent for more than 4 months, the man who went into hiding when China was going through the worst phase of the outbreak, the man who wants to be called a savior when the world is suffering because of the virus China exported, Xi Jinping, finally feeling the heat of global anger, came looking for a face saver today. Our cover story tonight is about how China is using the World Health Assembly to spin a new narrative around the Wuhan virus. Today, the decision-making body of the WHO kicked off a 2-day event. It's called the World Health Assembly. But for the Chinese president, this is a 3-part act designed to repair the damage to China's reputation. Before I get to that, let me give you some background. The World Health Assembly is an annual affair. It happens every year. Usually, the world pays little attention to it. Health ministers from member states attend it, and they discuss health policy. But this time, it's different. It's very different, all because of China. Usually, the 194 member states of the WHO gather in Geneva. For the first time in its history, this event is happening online. And it's the most important assembly in the history of the World Health Organization. Because the world is fighting a pandemic. More than 47 lakh people have been infected by the Wuhan virus. More than 3,15,000 people have died. The world wants answers from China. The world wants answers from the World Health Organization. So here's the first thing they did today. Draw up a resolution. A resolution that demands an investigation into the outbreak. Initially, 60 countries backed the call for such a probe. And that list of 60 included India. The momentum continued to grow. And now more than 100 countries the world over are supporting the demand for a probe. Let that sink in. 100. The resolution does not name China, but anyone who doesn't see this as aimed at China has to be living under a rock. It's obvious. And it is bound to raise some serious questions for China to answer. Questions like the ones we've been asking since December. What happened in Wuhan? How did the disease spread so widely and so quickly? Why did the WHO miss human-to-human transmission when it was there to see? At the center of all these questions is China and how much China has been trying to hide. Now, this is interesting. This morning, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said an investigation right now is, quote-unquote, premature. But the global tide was too strong, so the Chinese president decided to change tack. He decided to address the gathering himself. His mission was clear. Defend China, buy the silence of members, and promise solution. A 3-pronged approach. President Xi Jinping delivered the speech from his office. He did not contest the demand for an investigation. He said China will support an investigation led by the WHO, which is basically, we'll investigate what we did. Not very much, but a start nonetheless. He also put up a rather unconvincing defense of China. He called China's response transparent. That's not all. He preached the world about information sharing.
All along, China has acted with openness, transparency, and responsibility. We have provided the information to the WHO and relevant countries in the most timely fashion. We have released the genome sequence at the earliest possible time. We have shared control and treatment experience. We have done everything in our power to support and assist countries in need.
Either he's bought his own propaganda, or he believes that the world does not see through China's lies. China's transparency is frankly an oxymoron. And here's something else that China is known for. Buying its way out of everything. Xi Jinping resorted to the tried and tested trick. He whipped out China's checkbook again and offered $2 billion in international assistance.
I would like to announce China will provide $2 billion of international assistance within 2 years to help the COVID-19 response and with economic and social development in affected countries, especially developing countries.
It's not just money that he offered. He also promised a vaccine. And we won't be surprised if China finds a vaccine. It had the head start, it had the first samples, and for all we know, it made this virus. So Chinese researchers are the best place to find a cure and a vaccine. What's hard to believe, though, is Xi Jinping's promise that China will share the vaccine with the world for free.
COVID-19 vaccine development and deployment in China, when available, will be made available for public good. This will be China's contribution to ensure the vaccine's accessibility and affordability in developing countries.
The world has trust issues with things made in China. What you pay for, is faulty. Imagine the quality of what you're given for free. Anyway, Xi Jinping is trying to get an image makeover here after creating this crisis. His government wants to evade scrutiny by offering money and a vaccine that may or may not come. Remember, there's no vaccine yet for SARS or MERS. Developing a vaccine for coronavirus, and that too so quickly, is a tall ask. So why is Xi Jinping making these promises? They're a distraction. They're a face saver, a way to soften the impact of an impending investigation. The next 2 days will be challenging for China. The draft resolution on the global probe is likely to be adopted, and calls for Taiwan's inclusion into the WHO are growing louder. An alliance is taking shape, an alliance against China, an alliance to make China pay. How can the world do it? Courts of law are not the only option. On Gravitas tonight, we bring you 5 ways in which the world can make China pay, 5 levers that can be used against China. 1. Demand an investigation into the outbreak. 2. Support Taiwan. 3. Economic distancing from China. 4. Calling out China's abuse of Uyghurs and Africans. And 5. Blocking Chinese tech giants like Huawei. Let's take them one by one. First of all, push for a probe into the outbreak. Where did the virus come from? How did it spread? Australia was the first to demand an investigation. They will raise it during the World Health Assembly next week. New Zealand backs Australia. The United States is conducting its own investigation. Now, the European Union's top diplomat wants a probe too. The EU's foreign policy chief has called for an independent and scientific investigation. The second retaliation, Taiwan. The world should support Taiwan. It should be acknowledged for containing the virus. Despite its proximity to China, Taiwan has recorded only 440 cases and 7 deaths. Taiwan's success story has triggered a global campaign, a campaign to get Taiwan into the World Health Organization. Canada, Japan, France, Germany, the UK, New Zealand, Australia, all of these countries support Taiwan. Even Swaziland and Nicaragua have pledged support. China has slammed these voices of support and threatened all these countries. Retaliation number 3, economic distancing. The United States and Japan are upping the ante. US President Donald Trump has ordered American companies to leave China. Japan has set up a $2.2 billion fund to pull Japanese companies out of China. The economic distancing plan is not just about making companies leave China. It's also about keeping Chinese investments out. Countries in the European Union, Australia, even India have tightened their foreign investment rules. This is to prevent hostile takeovers of local businesses by the Chinese. Retaliation number 4, calling out China for human rights abuses. The US Senate has approved a bill. This bill calls on President Trump to take a tough stand on the persecution of Uyghur Muslims in China. The bill has the support of lawmakers on both sides. Meanwhile, the Human Rights Watch has slammed China for its treatment of Africans. They have released a report this month that talks about discrimination of Africans in China's Guangzhou province. China is also facing a backlash in Africa. Nigeria has been critical of the Chinese regime. On the 12th of May, a Nigerian lawmaker made a demand. He called for an investigative committee into Nigeria's borrowings from China. Not just the recent ones, but in the last 20 years. Review all of them, he said. And finally, the 5th retaliation, the demand to ban Chinese technology. Huawei is the most obvious target here. The United States has already extended its ban on Huawei for another year. And they're pushing other allies to check Chinese tech giants from making inroads. 5 ways to make China pay. This is still work in progress. Watch this space for updates.